excited to see you my fellow nerds and operations and making schools great by things like the detail. So super excited to talk to you all today about making Carline a great experience. I come to you with three hats on. One is a parent who spends a decent amount of time in car lines. The second is a person who's worked with a lot of school leaders and has a spouse who's a school administrator, so have heard about lots of the joys and pains of car lines with that lens. And then the third is with my Possip hat on, where we get to hear from parents and staff about the joys and the challenges. And so getting to hear about car lines a lot through there. So we'll get more into that in a bit. But excited to share with you our agenda. We've only got 30 minutes. It's going to be pretty action packed. Hopefully you keep the chat alive and well, because we're sharing some tips and tricks here, but we've also got the benefit of all of you here. And so all of your brain power hopefully is alive and well in the chat as well. And so hopefully, even as I'm sharing some of the tips and tricks, they might generate for you all ideas of things you're doing really well in your car line or things that might be a challenge. So here's how we're going to spend our time. I'm just going to share some fun facts about car lines. I say facts-ish about car lines because you all are here because you're invested in car lines, but you also have to get others invested in why this matters so much. So whether that's your teachers and staff or the families that are going through this. So I'm going to give you some tools so that you can equip yourself to do that. Then we're going to talk again about why is this important. We'll share some of the feedback that we've heard through our Possip pulse check, and then we're going to really spend the bulk of our time on some ways to approach and handle car lines. I'm going to a back to school night tonight myself for my son. So you all are probably already very much so in the thick of school starting and thinking about those first days of school. So I have a tendency to talk fast, so I'm going to try to catch myself, especially when I'm excited, and slow myself down. But when I get excited, I really start to talk really fast. So I will call this slide the fact-ish of car lines because it's really some back of the envelope math. But as my dad likes to say, car lines are an empirical question. You can probably run this data I'm about to share with you for your own car lines if you're really interested. So as a former middle school math teacher, I love to consider the math in everything. And so there's a true math kind of concept when you think about car lines. On average, based on some of my back of the envelope math, per school, about $40,000 of money is spent on gas, kind of idling in a car line. About 8,000 people hours are spent in car lines. And so you think about the dollar impact, the environmental impact, the social impact of what can seem like something really small. It helps paint the picture for why what you all are doing now is worthwhile, which is spending real intentional time thinking about your car line. So we're gonna do a quick little fun quiz. So Jasmine's gonna put this up. For some fun, I have a have you ever, and have you ever, so because of car line, have you ever had a city council member called about your car line? Have you ever had a neighborhood Facebook group blow up? And you can just check all of the ones. Had someone start a fight with another person or staff member, had a car break down in the middle of car line, or had a kid refuse to get out of the car. And you can check any or all that apply. I'm going to check the ones that I've seen. Take the poll real quick. The have you ever? Curious to see. And part of why I want to share this is because car lines can be really stressful. And so some of it though is being light. And just to remind you all that a lot of things happen in schools, not because anyone's done a bad job, just because schools are places with a lot of humans and a lot of things can go wrong or go some kind of way. And so just being prepared for that. Jasmine, okay, here we go. So let's see. So wow, 75% of folks have had someone start a fight with another person or staff member. 71% had a kid refuse to get out of the car. Car breakdowns, over half of people have had car breakdowns. Had a neighborhood Facebook group blow up, almost half. And then I'm surprised it's that high, almost 20% had a city council member called. So as you can see, a lot of fun and interesting things. I'm sure there's some stories that you all can put in the chat of things that you wouldn't believe happen in car lines. But again, just kind of to re-emphasize why this is such an important topic. All right, so one of the first reasons why we're talking about car lines is because they are a common trend. I'll share more about that in the feedback area, but we tag all of the trends that are coming up And out of over 1,000 trending topics, car lines was in the top 5. Again, I'm going to share a little bit more about this in a slide later, but just want to highlight that was a really big reason. Secondly, a good car line really matters, not only for its actual achievement of getting kids into school safely, but also for its symbolic achievement. For many parents, it is the only concrete thing they will see of their child's school day. And so you can think about that both car lines or buses. So it shows them how you think about community, your organizing, your relationships, efficiency, time, safety, and both them and their child. The car line can also achieve those same things. It can achieve community, relationships, and save time. So don't be afraid to let parents know why you take car lines so seriously, and also why with all joy intended. All right, so let's anchor ourselves in some of the feedback we got this past year. As I mentioned, there are over 1,200 comments mentioning car line across 317 schools and 517 reports. I mentioned earlier, it was a top 5 trend. Out of 1,800 parent trends, car line was in the top 5. For context on what else made the top 5, communication, COVID safety protocol, curriculum questions, and bullying were others in the top 5. So that just gives you a context for how much it matters and comes up. And just for context, we started this tagging system in the middle of the school year where we were tagging comments in this way. That means that this doesn't even include the first weeks of school, which is where we know the most feedback about car lines comes up. So I'm going to share 2 comments that kind of represent what we saw about car lines. The first was a positive example. I'll read this quote. I enjoy seeing the principals out in front in the mornings when I drop off my students. I think it shows your students that you care about them. That was from a Possip chat. Here's some feedback. Sometimes there is someone there, but not always. It needs to be a priority for the safety of our students. To effectively create a safe zone for cars and walkers, there should be 2 people every day there, not just on some days. And when the assigned people aren't there, there needs to be a speedy backup. It's a quite scary spot with no one patrolling it. So as you can see, this feedback on car lines really talks about safety. That's definitely something that comes through. So safety is a big priority. And also efficiency is also a big priority. All right, so that's context out of the way. And now we're gonna really spend the bulk of the time talking about some tips and tricks. Again, keep the chat going as you kind of co-sign or have ideas or as this makes you think of other things. But our hope with this time is that you'll leave with some seeds and that you'll be able to plant them and water them together. This is also to give you some boundaries and rails to your thinking, but ultimately you'll take these back and have some resources to go with them. That'll help you all work together on creating a great car line experience. All right, so idea number 1, and these ideas aren't in any particular order. Idea number 1 is give people the options and information that help them make the best choices. Help your parents help you. Give them the options that help them make the best choices. For example, can they park somewhere and pick their child up as a walker? Can their child take a bus and be picked up even more quickly or easily? Can they come 10 minutes after school dismisses and still be on time for pickup? I'll share as a parent, my hack is realizing that even though school gets out at 3:15, if I get there at 3:30, I'm still going to be on the tail end of the car line. But if you can let parents know that information that you might observe or see, then you can start to spread out when they come. And the more parents know and can know and optimize for, the more you can distribute the load of parents. The second one is, at schools, we have so many people, our desire is really to try to control as much as possible, but really think about what do you need to control and what you don't. So this headline is only try to control what you truly need to control. I've seen car lines where there is too much control. So you really think about safety. Safety is, of course, the number 1 thing you want to think about, but very often the natural instinct with car lines is to create a line. I won't get into different people's driving styles, but if any of you, some people, they see a line, they just want to get into it. So sometimes you just have an instinct to create a line, but is that always what is needed? I'll share a quick anecdotal example. At a camp pickup, for almost a decade, I had been doing pickups for camp. Parents would park their cars and they would walk over to get their kids. Well, this past year, this camp changed it so that all kids stayed on the bus and the parents all stayed in one line and one by one, parents would come and pick up their kids. That turned what had been like a 5-minute pickup experience into a 30-minute pickup experience. And that was an instance of that camp trying to control more than it needed to. If there are safe ways for kids to, or parents to drop their kids off on the same side of the street as the school without waiting in car line, consider if you truly need every single car to be in a line. So again, think about places where do we need to have control and where might we not have control. If you have a school, for example, I know we've got some partners here who have K-8 school, the level of control that you might need for your K-2 students might be very different from what you need for your 7th and 8th grade students. So again, really thinking about where do you need to have control and where do you not. All right. So the third step and kind of point is identify and remove bottleneck opportunities. There's a book called The Goal that is legendary in business schools. If you're an ops lead, you might want to read the book. But the big idea in the book, and forgive me for the spoiler alert, is that there is often a bottleneck in the system. So it uses the analogy of a Boy Scout camping trip where they're hiking and the troop needs to reach a certain destination by a certain hour. And there's a particularly slow kid named Herbie, who is initially he's walking in the middle of the group, but the problem is Herbie is slowing down everyone who comes behind him. Like the group can only move as fast as Herbie moves. And so if Herbie's slow, then the whole group moves slow. We don't like to say this, but we all have Herbies in our car lines. So it could be, we talked about a kid who didn't want to get out of the car. So you've got a kid who's still adjusting to being at school, and it takes some kind of a bit of a tug of war to get the kid out of the car. You've got people like me who I can be distracted, and I get to the front of the car line and I'm like, oh snap, my kids don't have any of their things ready. And we're like kind of, trying to get everything together. Make sure you have an outlet for those bottlenecks and a place to send those people. So it could be like, okay, here's our car line. Oh, okay, you're gonna need a little more time. Here's a parking space we have reserved for you all. And just making sure parents know we like to get our kids out the door within 20 seconds. So we're going to ask you to go over to that side area that we have where you can take a little bit more time to get out. So think about how you can identify and remove places where there are bottleneck opportunities or create spaces for the channel folks if they're having a hard time. You noticed I said just now, and then I said an intentional goal, 20 seconds. Now I made that number up. I don't even know what's realistic necessarily, but you don't have to make a number up. So think about how you can set a goal, set a number goal, and an experience goal. How long do you want a family to wait in the car line? Do you want families, how long do you want them to idle? Like how long do you want them to kind of, from when they arrive to when they get out of it? How long do you want it take to get a kid in and out of the car line? And then how do you want a parent or a student or teacher to describe their experience? Kind of what's your goal for the experience of the car line or for your teachers of working in the car line? What would they say? Is it fun? Is it efficient? Is it rewarding? Is it collaborative? Is it safe? All of the above. But just think about what numeric goals you can set and then also what experience goals you can set. And then you can also articulate those with your families and with your students so that they're also invested in the goal that you have. Hey, we're trying to make our car line as quick as possible. Our goal is for each of our students to get in and out within this matter of time. And you can put that in a newsletter. Not everyone's going to necessarily read the newsletter and get into the goal, but you certainly will have people who are in there with you and they'll understand your why when you make some decisions that you do on your car line. Keep that goal in mind and even adjust it as you think about your school's mission and goal. So this fifth point is first impression, constant impression of the experience. I mentioned this earlier, but remember that your car line is your daily opportunity to set and reinforce the impression you want your families to have of your school. You can also think about this for your walkers and your buses also. What kind of impression do you want families to have of your school? So that means you can use yard signs or school signs to reinforce key messages. Last year, I remember a message outside of a high school in Houston, and it was on their billboard and it said, problems with your computer, call 555-5555. We want to help. Of course, that wasn't the phone number, but just seeing that as a third party communicated a few things to me that parents were seeing when they drove by. One, it showed that the school cared. Secondly, it showed that the school had a problem that they wanted to help solve. And third, they gave them very concrete information that they could use. I've seen other schools with signs such as, what are you reading to your kid tonight? You could think about, anything you want to say. We're so proud of your students. We're so glad to have you back. What are the constant impressions in the experience or the values that you want to communicate to families? And consider all the ways you want to communicate that impression, and share that with teachers and staff. That gets to a second really important point is not only the structure, but also the other impression will come from your teachers and staff. We see parents sharing feedback, positive feedback often about how meaningful it is to see teachers and staff and principals in Carline saying hi, like, kind of just some of those things. So think about what you want your staff members to be doing, and also reminding them that if they're on duty, they are truly on duty. So a person who's on duty on Carline who's on their phone is actually worse than not having a person there at all, because they're showing that they're disinterested and not present and active. I mean, they're communicating a message when they are there, and it's not the one you want. So just also being really thoughtful about making sure that your staff knows that the Carline is a place where you're, reinforcing the impression that you want people to have. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but also, especially if you have older kids, remember there are opportunities to involve students and student leadership here. That's also an impression you might want to be communicating, which is that we have students here who are leaders, we develop competent leaders, and involving older students in particular is another way where you can reinforce the impression of the experience. All right. This next note is a bit more logistical and practical, but think about how you can use and maximize your land. As some examples and things to consider. Does your school sit on a corner? Again, I talked about how we love lines, but we don't always wrap around the corner. So think about, can you get 50 cues card up at a time as opposed to 50? Could you wrap your car line around a corner instead of doing a straight line? I know for a lot of us, we probably start thinking about all the problems. And so you might think about all the problems your land has or your school structure or school building has, but just kind of suspend that for a little bit and pretend you have the best possible land possible. Like whatever you have is the best you could ever have, and figure out how you can maximize it in that way. You might need to use cones or kind of like rethink some things to do that, but just kind of figure out how you can use and maximize your land, and think of it as like your unique child. Like, again, it may be imperfect, but it's yours. And so just think about all the ways you can think of it from an asset-based way. That might also be an opportunity to enlist teachers and staff, and maybe even families. Think about maybe in a 30-minute hackathon, or use their Possip Pulse check to share their ideas about how else can we think about Carline differently, or how else can we use our land to our benefit. So, the big thing you're trying to think about is where can a student or a kid safely exit their car and get into the school? And with that in mind, then you might be able to come up with some different ideas and variations. And again, this is also an opportunity to think about different ages for different kids. So maybe you still need your kids in K-2 to go directly in front of the school, but if a parent only has a kid who's like a fifth grader, maybe they can go in somewhere else or just be dropped off adjacent to the school. So just think about, again, that gets back to the point of like, what do I need to control versus what do I not? And how can I use and maximize my land in different and creative ways? All right, I shared some of the math earlier, but always a reason to do more math. You'll probably remember, and maybe some of y'all will even be triggered by the reminder of the first days of reopening post-virtual, when you went from potentially having only half of your students to maybe all of your students all at once. And a lot of schools were overwhelmed with twice as many kids and parents returning. A lot of things have been out of practice for doing drop-off. So don't be afraid to do more math on Carline. Some Possip partners, a lot of Possip partners ask parents before school starts what their transportation plans are. That gives you an anticipated number for car lines, and then do some more realistic math about how long will it take to get students out of the car, and then start to play with variables. So can we figure out a way to get more parents dropping off at the same time? Can we figure out a way to incent some parents to wait later, come earlier? If you have a very narrow window, like a 15-minute window for drop off, you know that you're going to be trying to crowd more people in. So is there a way to extend that to 30 minutes instead, and that you're kind of smoothing out the load? Just getting back to an earlier point, control what you need to control, but conversely, don't control what you don't need to control. Also thinking about, can parents drop kids off before a certain time, recognizing maybe that their kid won't be supervised if they drop them off early, but that's their kind of ability as a parent. So just some things to think about and to reflect on as you're kind of trying to work out the equation of the car line. Warn and enlist the neighbors and neighborhood. We saw there were about half of folks that seen some sort of blow up on the neighborhood Facebook page. Try to get in front of the neighborhood drama. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but it'll help. So some things you can do is put a flyer in neighbors' cars, kind of the vicinity around. These are things also you can ask parents to help with. But maybe putting a flyer on their cars, thanking them for their patience, especially in the first week of school, telling them what to expect, and how they can be set up for success. For example, our car line is typically most active between 7:30 and 8 a.m. and 3 and 3:30 p.m. You probably want to just keep that in mind and use that to determine when you come and go. But just giving them as much information as they can, so they're invested also in the success of your car line. And instead of being another impediment to have to work through or solve if they get angry, hopefully you, as much as possible, get in front of them. We've also seen schools who've done, nice things, including not only do they do a letter, but they might do like a little treat for neighbors, especially if they're in places where their driveway might get blocked. But just go ahead and anticipate what some of the things that could go wrong for the neighbors and neighborhood, and to the extent possible, especially for those who are most proximate to the school, go ahead and share that information with them. All right, we're almost getting to the end. I talked about this earlier, but enlist kids, all of them. Have teachers let kids know in the first weeks. A lot of teachers are working on transitions and operations. Tell them that you want to see how quickly kids can get transitioned to their buses, to their cars, etc. Especially for kindergartners who are really new to the whole idea of school and moving quickly. Think about, are there opportunities to help them get a time in their head that they can really celebrate? In addition to getting all kids enlisted, figuring out opportunities to enlist older kids to help at car lines. Maybe they can be buddies for kindergartners, or they can help greet students, or they can help manage traffic, again, assuming that they can do it in a safe way. But really think about opportunities to enlist kids. And this can also, again, be a place where you're reinforcing your mission as a school. All right, make it plain. Make it as easy as possible to follow and understand the car line procedure. One of our Possip teammates in Denver shared this great tip. And one of the big things is tell people again and again, and draw a diagram, and then just make a song about it, and then tell them again. We know, again, to the humans, you've got a couple hundred humans who are all kind of doing their own thing and have their own interpretation of what you're telling them. So just make sure you tell them again and again, and then have visual cues and visual reminders of them, arrows, especially in the first few weeks. Put up lots of signs, so having lots of consistency and communication. They're saying is that people need to hear something 7 times to internalize it. So again, especially if there are big things that you don't want people to do, just making sure that's really clear, and that especially in the first week that it's being reinforced again and again. And then finally, last but certainly not least, make it joyful and have fun. It's so fun to see smiles and car lines of kids and parents and teachers and principals. So there's a study on cueing, and there's a link to one of the studies in our blog. But the idea is people mind waiting less when they are distracted. So that's why when we're in the grocery store, there are tabloids and People magazines, so that we're distracted from the fact that we're waiting in a long line. So think about what joy and fun can you bring to your car line. Is it music? Is it teachers or parents or kids holding up signs? They could be holding up a sign with information. Hey, reminder, school gets out at 2 today. It could be inspiration. I love learning about X, Y, Z. So just think about what some information or inspiration you might have. Of course, we want folks to stay focused on the road, especially when it's time to drive and move. But even earlier on, kind of when parents are just sitting there in the car line before the car line really gets moving, think about if there are opportunities for distraction or fun. And of course, the biggest way to bring joy is the people. So, like I said, it's such a great thing to see the smiles and the joy as school admins and the kids off for the day or welcoming them into the building. So just really keeping that in mind and making sure that it's set up in a way logistically and operationally where there is space for fun, because it is no fun if you got folks yelling at you and you got frustrated or angry parents. Of course, that kills the fun. So just to the extent possible, trying to keep that fun going. All right, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. We did, and we do have just a couple minutes if anybody wants to submit a question into the chat. So I will let you guys do that as I give you one more announcement. So please, in the chat, if you have any questions for Shawnee, we have a couple minutes to address those. And I'll also let you guys know that we're going to be having another event similar to this, 30 minutes, action-packed, solution-packed at the end of August on communication made simple. So know that we're going to be sending you information about that, and we look forward to seeing you. All right, last chance for questions. I'm going to give it that awkward pause. Awesome.
Well, we'll share the recording next week. And we've already got a blog on our, thanks to Virginia, who the teacher in North Carolina, she posted a blog post about freight car lines. And then also, yeah, Alice put this in there, but just a reminder that, you know, again, schools are places full of lots of people. And so car lines are, you know, there are lots of funny memes both on the parent side and on the school side. So they're just the thing because we're trying to get lots of humans into the school building. And so that's just part of the process. So thank you all for caring about being intentional and about the time and experiences of your families and your students and your staff. And we're super excited to have gotten to spend this time with y'all. Thanks for coming.
Yes, you'll get an email today from us asking for your feedback, and that's also an opportunity to share all. So thank you so much. Have a great day.